Go back to when you were in your 20s, you were a new believer, and you died?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so, very, very hungry, young Christian, just very passionate, praying every possible hour of the day, and basically begging God to please let me be involved in the ministry full time. That's all I wanted to do. Like the Bible says, the zeal of the Lord hath eaten me up, right? And so came home from work one day, prayed before I went to bed for probably several hours.
Wow.
And then went to sleep.
Now you were hungry. You
Yeah,
were
very
okay.
much so.
Wow.
But went to sleep, and the next thing I know, I am standing in front of a very, very brilliant light. And it's actually impossible to put into words exactly what it was that I was seeing. There was a brilliance of rainbow-type colors. This was more than three-dimensional. This was 10-dimensional or 20-dimensional or something.
Now, it was like instantaneous? You weren't going through like a tunnel? Or
No,
okay.
no, it wasn't your standard like near-death experience, or maybe it was, I don't know. But anyway, I'm in front of a brilliant light. Now, somehow I knew that I was standing before God. I also somehow knew that he had told me some things and he had shown me some things. And in fact, part of what I never get into is I also knew that a scroll had rolled out in front of me and things were playing out on this, like I was seeing the future. But then all of a sudden he tells me, you have to go back now and you're not going to remember.
That's crazy, though. It's like he brings you up there, he shows you all these things, and then he said, you're going to forget? You're not going to remember this stuff? Well, why?
Well, I didn't know until later. I learned later why that was the case, but the last thing I recall is me saying, please don't let me forget. Don't let me forget. It's too wonderful. Don't let me forget. But he had told me I was going to forget. So I started falling backward. It was just as if somebody had pushed me out of an airplane and my back's towards the earth. I can literally hear the wind going around me. It was so vivid. And this light is moving away from me very quickly. Moments later, I literally saw the roof of my house go around me, right? And I landed on the bed with what felt like a thud, right? And I sat up in bed, took in this deep breath, like that. And now I was no longer in this dream state, but I was literally physically awake now and sitting on the bed.
Well, now I got to ask you, Tom, how do you know you really died? I mean, it could have just been a weird dream.
Right, except for the fact that I hear weeping. And I turn and I look, and my beautiful young wife is sitting up on the bed. Her head is down inside of her hands, and she's been crying for a while. And I said, babe, what's the matter? What's the matter? And when she's able to collect herself, she explains how she had woke up in the middle of the night and I was dead. No breath, no heartbeat, no pulse, no anything. Wow. And she had literally spent quite a bit of time, something like maybe 15 minutes, trying to resuscitate me, trying to blow into my mouth, beating on my chest, trying to get me to respond at all.
So you were dead. I mean, it wasn't like a minute, a 15-minute period. Okay.
A long period of time. And so, I'm trying to take all of this in and still wondering what had just happened to me. Where was I? What was it that I saw? Why was I told I would not remember?
Right.
And, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the next day I went and found my pastor, right? And I tell him what happened to me, and his response, was pretty much, well, you probably ate too many chili beans before you went to bed, or he thought maybe I had even been poisoned somehow, right? But the idea of something supernatural just wasn't in his bailiwick. So I learned really quick. In the New Testament it says not to give that which is holy unto dogs, or, pigs will turn and rend them under feet. And so I'm not saying my pastor was a pig, by the way.
Yeah.
Nice AG guy, but he just didn't get it. But what then happened was that caused me to really withdraw into myself and not to talk about any of this publicly. But I was praying every single day, praying. Why did this happen? Why would you? It didn't make any sense to me. Why would you tell me things, but then say you're not going to remember? That just didn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
But I also happened to be reading through the Bible for the first time in my life, and book by book through the Bible. And a few weeks after that event, still praying about it every day, I'm in the book of Job, chapter 33. And you know what the charismatics talk about, the logos and rhema,
right.
the difference between the printed word and then when the word comes alive, right? And I was literally reading through, and here's what my eyes fell upon in chapter 33 of Job, verse 14. For God speaks once, yea, twice, yet man perceives it not. Now that's the first clue that there's something hidden here, right? Verse 15, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instructions, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. And there for the first time was the answer to my prayer, really in great detail. He even explains why you're not going to remember. He says it's to withdraw man from his purpose. I totally understood that even as a young preacher, that if I had then saw the fact that someday I'd be sitting here with a guy like Bob doing television and, you know, on the Sid Roth program, and if I would have seen all of this, being a publisher, being a best-selling author, speaking at conferences, you know, what would I have done? I would have aimed at it, and I would have done everything I could do to go directly there and make it happen. That would have been my purpose. He wouldn't let me remember. Why? Because he had a different path that it was important for me to walk through. Both the good, the bad, the struggles, everything that I would have to learn that could season me and qualify me to later on be able to do what I do. But he also says to hide pride from man. And as much as I'd like to think that as a young preacher, if I had seen doing all of this stuff, that I would not have been lifted up with pride, it's very possible, right? Because again, not seasoned, not experienced. So there was a methodology behind it. And
now, so now God, though, did have a purpose, and he did unfold to you later on some of those things that you received in heaven, but you didn't remember. And when we come back, Tom is going to talk about one of those things that God showed him. It's an amazing prediction about the Pope that came true. Come back and join us in just a moment. Welcome back to Something More. I'm here with Tom Horn. And before we get to your prophecy about the Pope, one of the things that God revealed to you was something that was happening or going to happen in the religious institution you were part of. So what happened with that?
Yeah, so I don't talk about that one very much publicly because there are elements of it that are embarrassing to some of the executive members. I went on to pastor, by the way, for 25 years in the Assemblies of God, or right at 25 years. I was an executive in the Oregon District of the Assemblies of God for about 8 years. Right when I retired, and by the way, I've never been so busy being retired in my whole life, but right when I retired from the Assemblies of God, I had a vivid dream, and when I woke up, I wrote down, it was a whole series of like 12 points of things that were going to happen. One of them even included the death of a young man before it unfolded. And I sealed this and sent it to the state superintendent of the Assemblies of God, gave my son a copy of the letter. And not long ago, my son recovered that letter and he came back to me and he was just ashen white. He said, Dad, he said, this is spooky, it's scary. He said, every single thing you put on here happened exactly as you detailed, including the death of this young man. So that was one of the times, but again, there's a lot of elements to that could be embarrassing to some members of the organization, so I don't talk about it.
But the fact was, you heard in a dream ahead of time, and so that's sort of the pattern then. God's unpacking, unfolding these things to you at the appropriate time, like in a dream. You'll wake up and you'll have a knowing that this is going to happen, and you documented that. So let's fast forward then a little bit to the whole thing about the Pope. And now this goes back just a few years to, let's say, 2011. And you and a researcher you were working with, Chris Putnam, were looking into a 900-year-old prophecy by this Saint Malachi about the popes. And what was that about?
Yeah, so allegedly, Malachi O'Morgair, he was an Irish bishop, and in the 1100s he was summoned to Rome by Pope Celestine II. To give a report on his diocese. And so there's a big long story. We talk about it in the book, Petrus Romanus. He's traveling across Europe. He's seeing the conditions of the average person, and he was really a people's individual. He cared about people and their suffering. And he's seeing all this terrible plight across Europe. Then he winds up in Rome, and it's just the opposite, the opulence, right? All the regality and the gowns and the fine wines and money and power and that the popes were enjoying and the cardinals around the pope. And he was really put off by it. So he gives this report. Now he's leaving Rome, and as he's coming up over the top of the 7 hills, according to the story, he suddenly receives a vision. And the vision's actually a judgment against the papacy. He sees that God is only going to allow this to go on so long. And so he writes down a series of 112 lines, each one of them representing each pope that would arrive in succession from Pope Celestine to the final pope, who he calls Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman, right? And this would be the pope that would be sitting on the throne of Peter in Rome when the earth enters into the Great Tribulation period and the false prophet arrives in the personage of this pope.
Okay,
pope
but that's
number 112.
But that's like centuries ago.
Right.
And so let's fast forward a little bit. There's this Belgian Jesuit priest named Thibault, Rene Thibault, who studied this Malachi prophecy, and based on that, he decided, or he predicted, that a pope would resign in like 2012. I mean, that was 60 years in advance.
Right.
And your associate Chris translated, studied what Thibault had to say, and you all came to the conclusion that yes, this was going to happen. And you had a dream in connection with this as well.
Yeah, so this is what's interesting. Thibault never said that a pope would resign.
Okay.
He only said that Pope number 112 would arrive based on his predictions, which some of it was based on just simple mathematics, the average span of a pope, formulating that forward. He also got into some mystical stuff, the stars and the moon and alignments and just a bunch of stuff. Right. But he predicted about 65 years now ago that the 112th Pope would arrive, he thought, sometime around April of 2012. Now here's what's very strange about what happens with me, is I will see something, I will write it down ahead of the event, ahead of the discovery, and share it with people. And the one about the Pope Benedict resigning in 2012, I spoke everywhere about that.
You went out on a limb.
I really did. 2010, I go to bed, and by the way, I don't know the significance of this. Maybe somebody watching this show can tell me. It's always right at around 2 a.m. in the morning when I fall into this place. And I'm back there now again, and the scroll is unfolded again, and I see this stuff in very vivid depictions. And this time it was really simple. All I saw were very dark clouds rising up over the Vatican, and I woke up. And the minute I woke up, I started to write it down. There wasn't a lot of detail, but then I started writing that Pope Benedict the 16th is going to resign. And I even put a date and a time on it in April of 2012. So came on Sid Ross at Supernatural. I'm on all these different programs, all kinds of media.
Yeah.
My own program as well by then. And I'm saying, I predict that Pope Benedict is going to resign. He's going to do it in April of 2012. Well, I'm saying this in 2011, right?
Yeah, but Tom, we get all the way through 2012 and nothing happens.
Yeah, well, that's what it appeared, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, by the way, because I had gone so far out on a limb, and I knew that this was going to happen. No doubt whatsoever. I had seen it.
Right.
None of these quickenings, revelations so far have ever failed to come true exactly as I've seen them. So this really had me bewildered. Now I was back to God again. Now wait a minute, what's going on here? I don't get it. So we go all the way through 2012. But then what happens is February of 2013. The Vatican announces Pope Benedict XVI has resigned. He is stepping down.
Okay.
Right? But that same day, and people can Google and read this for themselves, the El Observatorio Romano, which is the Vatican's media outlet, printed an article, but they also gave an interview to a New York Times journalist. And in that interview, they admitted that Pope Benedict actually, officially, secretly resigned before the Roman Curia when he returned from a trip in March of 2012, and they accepted it in April. So it involved both March and April. He did it in March, they accepted it in April 2012, just exactly as I had predicted that it would happen. And by the way, if you read the article, it says it was kept in a strict reserve, a for your eyes only, top secret security clearance required, right? Even for cardinals. Most of the cardinals were surprised. They had no idea that this had happened.
Did you get that? So God showed this to him. He knew it. He knew it was true. And even though he went through 2012, didn't see evidence, but when they got to 2013, it turned out, yes, it really happened. Okay, I want to get to a more current prediction in the next segment. And this is something that's going to be coming up. And it's earth, literally earth shattering. You don't want to miss this. Come right back. Welcome back to Something More. I'm here with Tom Horn. It's been a fascinating discussion, and Tom has so many different books on different subjects, and it's we could sit here and talk all day, but we don't have all day. But before the break, I talked about a more current prophecy or more current prediction God has shown you that's going to come to pass. About a year ago, you had a dream. Mm-hmm. Tell me what that one was about.
Yeah, this was the most frightening, the most terrifying, and it kind of stands at odds with the fact that I'm a positive person and I like to speak positively. I don't like talking about things that are fearful. But this literally shook me to the bone. And we don't have time in this interview to go into the details. At first I thought I was looking at a giant dragon that was way up in the heavens, moving, undulating, serpent-like towards earth. But then I was pulled up above it, and looking down on it, I saw that it was actually a giant space rock. And the way it was turning as it was moving through space and the light of the sun was shining on it, it gave it the impression of being a great dragon that was moving through the heavens. Now, fast forward in that story, what I saw terrified me. I saw it impact the earth. It was catastrophic when it did. And when I woke up, I almost literally fell out of bed. This had more detail than any vision I had seen before. A lot of it is in the book, The Wormwood Prophecy. But when I woke up, I sat up in bed, I started to start writing down what I had seen, and it was as if a voice spoke in the room, and it said a single word. It said, Apophis. Now, I knew that there was an ancient Egyptian chaos dragon named Apophis, the enemy of light. I didn't know a lot about it. I also knew that NASA had named an asteroid Apophis, and I didn't know anything about that. And so my first mission, as soon as I got out of bed, went to my computer, turned it on, so I started doing research into the Apophis asteroid and all of the details around it and what NASA first said about it, what they're now today saying about it, and the potential for it to strike the earth in just a bit over 9 years from right now. Of all dates, by the way, Friday the 13th,
in
April
2029. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's kind of scary, Tom. So what, especially believers hearing that, what should they do? I mean, we don't want to live in fear.
We don't want to live in fear, but of course, this is part of prophecy. The entire 8th chapter of the book of Revelation deals with what astronomers now, I learned this after the fact, actually believe is detailing the 4 elements of an asteroid impact on the earth from each of the first 4 trumpets. It literally caused me to start reading the scripture differently. But when you say what should Christians do about it?
Right.
I read Luke 21, starting at 25 now. differently than I ever did 25 years as a pastor, but check out what it says. It says, there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and the Greek word there, stars, is asteroids.
Really?
And upon the earth, distress of nations. That's exactly what I saw. Perplexity. That's exactly what I saw. The sea and the waves roaring. That's exactly what I saw. Men's hearts failing them for fear, for looking after those things that are coming upon the earth. That's exactly what I saw. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. That's exactly what I saw. But then note how this ends. But then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. All of the ancients believed that asteroids were messengers of the gods, and in the Bible, it's a messenger of God himself. And the message is, lift up your head, look up. Your redemption is drawing nigh. Preaching the imminency of the second coming of Jesus Christ is something that's been missing in the church for the last few decades. But I actually believe that by 2025, people are going to be able to take a telescope at their home, look up into heaven, and they're going to see Apophis racing towards the earth. 24 months later, they'll be able to see it with the naked eye. And what I saw was everybody on the planet on their face begging God to deliver them from this menace that was coming. So I think this could actually initiate the next great awakening, a final revival, if you will, that will help to usher in literally millions and millions of people around the world. And then there's one other element about this, and there's a precedent for it in Scripture, and that is that the judgment could be averted. If enough people pray, if enough people turn to God and rend their heart, it says, instead of their garments, it could be averted. There's a pattern for that all through the Scripture.
Absolutely.
The book of Joel, if you will turn to me, I will send you a blessing instead of a cursing. The story of Jonah being sent into Nineveh, up and down the streets, you're going to be destroyed in 40 days.
So there is good news. Tom, thank you for being my guest on Something More, and thank you for watching us and visiting with us today. And you know, there is good news. There is good news of revival coming, of people seeing the threat and turning to God. If you know Him already, follow Tom's example. Be hungry, be desperate for God. Be open to hearing from Him.